Hello and welcome to the Siwi Sofa, where we sit down with some of the most interesting participants at this year's World Water Week to learn more about the array of water-related issues being discussed this week in Stockholm. My name is Eric Paglia, host of the Siwi Sofa, which is now being streamed live on the Siwi Media Hub. The name of this session is Transforming the Textile Sector Towards a Sustainable Future. And joining me here on the sofa, we have Christopher Briggs, the Executive Director of Water Footprint Network. Hi. We have Lila Petri, Manager of Corporate Partnerships at WWF International, and Dawn McGregor, who works with projects and textiles at the China Water Risk Organization. Hi. Welcome you all to the Siwi Sofa. Very happy to have you here today. Now, the textile industry, which you're all involved with in one way or another, is ranked as the second largest polluter globally, with a large share of that pollution ending up in the water. What are each of your organizations doing to provide solutions to this problem? Chris?
Thanks, Eric. Well, we've been very lucky in Water Footprint Network to get the support of CNA Foundation in carrying out 4 studies recently, looking at both cotton, how its footprint is changing, and the issues of viscose and polyester, and then the washing, dyeing, and finishing mills. And those 4 studies are out, and they show very strongly that the pollution, the grey water footprint that's resulting from the actions, is most strongly focused on the mills and the process. Lots of possibilities of change, lots of possibilities for improvement, and that's what's exciting, because that information that was started in 2013 has now already been used by the industry to put in changes, make sure that people are measuring the water, and help move the industry into a cleaner space. But there's an awful lot to be done. It's a very big industry, and the difficulty is that the majority of these sites, say for looking for washing, dyeing and finishing, or where the cotton is being produced, they are in water scarce areas, or worse, water scarce and with a polluted water basin. So there are serious problems to handle, and we're very pleased to be able to work with the industry to see how to move things forward. Thanks.
Lila?
Thank you. So we have 3 ways of working actually that's connected to this sector. The first is that we have a long history of working on sustainable cotton, and BCI and other standards that we have supported help to reduce the runoff and the pollutants from cotton growing. And we've done that for a number of years, and also now expanding to a more kind of national engagement plan around cotton in each of our key areas. The second part is that we work with some of the world's leading brands on their own approach to sustainability. And we also then work with some of the leading organizations working on setting standards for the industry. So that part of our work allows us to have a global discussion about what good looks like and help influence the practices of all the leading brands. The third part, which I think is the most interesting, is that we work in a lot of key river basins in the world that overlap with textile production. And we work on the technical side, as a lot of organizations do, to reduce impacts, but we also work on the governance and the collective action space. And for us, that's crucial, because if a site is doing well in terms of impacts from, let's say, wastewater, but the context around is not governed well, or there are lots of other polluters, you're not actually addressing the root cause. So our programs are all about addressing those root causes and working with a group of different stakeholders to bring together combined solutions to that challenge.
Very good. Dawn?
Thanks. So China Water Risk works to place water as a business and financial risk, and we do this across various sectors, one of which is textiles, and that is how we engage with the sector primarily. We also work on siloing risk. So within textiles, we've been commissioned to do reports for financial institutions. And what we cover is the water exposure that investors and businesses have, all the way from the raw materials, so cotton, all the way to being then with the consumer at the end. And actually, very happy to say that yesterday we hosted a session and we launched our latest report, thanks to the CNA Foundation as well. We work with them. And it was called Insights from China's Textile Manufacturers. And it was a survey, and over 140 manufacturers responded. And of that 85, we analyzed their answers and found their key challenges to going clean, circular, and as well as what assistance they want from different industry actors, be it brands, industry associations. So what we try and do is give voice to what's happening in China and on the ground and show that the textile industry there is really undergoing a significant transformation.
And we've been joined by our fourth guest here. So I'd like to introduce Rami Narte.
No.
You're not Rami.
Jiaolin.
Jiaolin, I'm sorry. Okay, we're improvising here a little bit. Are you also from the Swedish Textile Water Initiative?
Yes.
Okay. Well, perhaps you could tell us a bit about your work with convening these other organizations and what STWI is doing to address the problem of water pollution in the textile industry.
Okay. As you may know, that Siwi has been supporting the factories on the ground since 2012, and with this funding support from SIDA, we have been implementing a large-scale project in 5 countries, including China, Bangladesh, India, Ethiopia, and Turkey. And the aim is to support the factories with trainings and capacity buildings and on-site technical support to improve their water management, energy management, and chemical management from the different perspectives. So we have been doing this since 2014, and significant result has been achieved over the last 3 years. And this is last year with this funding, and we also going to continue the support in the textile industry after 2018.
Now, besides all sitting here on the sofa together, what sort of collaborations do the organizations have in terms of dealing with this problem of water pollution in the textile industry? Do you work together under the STWI umbrella, or what other ways do you guys work to meet this common challenge?
So we collaborate with WWF, they're one of our founders. We don't work obviously with China water risk at this moment, but we have always intentions to collaborate, and we've been working with Siwi for a good long time. Our collaborations are with organizations like Textile Exchange, Better Coalition, Better Cotton Coalition, and also Apparel Coalition. And those are the organizations that we've been working with to be able to support the wishes of the textile industry and the wishes of people to have a less polluting impact and footprint from the industry.
I think actually what's great is that we're at a point where almost all of our organisations are coming together, and you see this with the alignment of the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, with the DHC, with we're now members of SAC. A lot of us are working together in different projects in different places, and this is now an interconnected effort rather than a series of individual organisations working on delivering projects. And I think that's really exciting actually in terms of what we can do next, because we're all drawing on the skills and the expertise of each other's organisations to in the end make radical transformation.
I'll completely echo what Lila's just said. We use data from the Water Footprint Network. We will have a report actually coming out with WWF either later this year, and other organizations in China that are working on textiles like IPE. We very much know Siwi and also Solidaridad in China. So I think, and what Lila said as well, we all have different skill sets, and we've all come to a really good point where we've recognized everyone's strengths, and we're now pulling on them each other. And also the big organizations like SAC, ZDHC, we're all leveraging off each other, and so you're really starting to see the global industry start to change.
Same for Siwi. We are also member of ZHC and also SAC, and also we are in collaboration with WWF and also China Water Risk. In China, particularly, also working closely with the national industrial associations and other stakeholders, including the government organizations and NGOs. So we believe that it's really important to really collaborate with each other, because all the different organizations, they have their own strengths. So it's really important to join force and create a synergy, so we can really make use of the resources in order to maximize the impact.
If I may,
Absolutely.
I think you made a really interesting point, which is that the connections with governmental organisations is vital. Because I think, for us, in all the geographies we're working in, we have very strong connections with different sectoral or water governance bodies. And I'm sure it's quite similar for all of us, actually. They are maybe not on the sofa, but they are critical to the journey. because they really will drive the change ultimately on the ground. So I think that was a really important point, and I know there's a whole laundry list of governmental organisations who are also part of this collaboration now.
Yeah.
Now, each of you have hosted a session here at the World Water Week. I think Dawn said a little bit about hers, but perhaps you all could share what has been discussed and what's sort of the cutting edge of work in this field at the moment.
So we had a lot of fun because we had the CEO of RenewCell, Matthias Larsen, and we had Krishna Manda from Lensing, and we also had Sophie Nguyen from Helvetas. And to start off with, the whole concept of reusing materials is shown by RenewCell, who are actually extracting the cotton from old jeans and making new materials from it. Very, very clever, very sophisticated, and a very visionary man, somebody who is showing how you can possibly do what we need to do, which is more recycling. Excellent ideas, and one of the things he was saying is that we only spend a very small amount of our time with these clothes. Why do we wear them? Why don't we have libraries? Why don't we rent them? What's the point of buying stuff all the time? Then that means that you could have a better recycling process. And Krishna was there. He was there for viscose, which is an industry that is sometimes seen to be polluting, but Lensing is a massive organization in industry, and they have managed to bring the system to close it, bringing down the use of water by 64%, 90% less chemicals, 20% less energy. And these are all factors that allow the industry to be effective, to be responsive to people's needs, and to pollute less. There's an awful lot to be done in any single area, whether it's on dyeing, on heating, on cleaning. All of those issues are ones where one can see improvements, and that's exciting. And the other side of the coin, which is Helvetas is looking at, is how do you get the water productivity? How do you get cotton to grow in the fields without waste? How do you get the maximum impact for every drop? And how do you get people to understand that they have to change their agricultural practices to be able to have a future for cotton? And clearly, better cotton is going to be more and more popular. It has a very, very large impact on the market, and I hope that that will increase. Organic is really great, but it's not delivering, and we have to see that better cotton is probably the way that most of the industry will want to see. So there's a lot of enthusiasm, there's a lot of excitement, and I think there was a disappointment that there aren't engineers around, that they're not all of us able to understand the issues or passing that message around to the community of scientists, of technologists, and of communicators. So there's a lot to be done, but it was a very exciting session and one that I certainly enjoyed a great deal. Thanks.
So I'm lucky actually that I was helping co-convene a whole day of 3 seminars, and I think every organisation on this sofa was part of it. So the first session was on kind of the site level discussions around impacts, and especially with wastewater. So Krista was part of that session. Also a gentleman from Egypt who'd done a lot of analysis on the impacts in that country, and also one of my colleagues talking about our programme of engagement in Pakistan. So that was very much focused on what are the challenges at a technical level on site, and are there solutions available? I think the resounding answer was yes, solutions are available. But at the end of the session, we surveyed people and said, do you think this is enough in itself? And about 50% of the people said yes, and about 50% said no. So we were halfway-ish. The second session was then more about, okay, so if site-level technical expertise isn't enough, what next? And so we were talking about these sort of shared platforms we all mentioned, CSCs, at DHC. We heard from CDP as well, and we also heard from 2 brands, which was Philippa K and Nike. And essentially the discussion there was, we are all collaborating now, but what do we need to do to optimize this, and what's going to be the key game changers? And I think a lot of things came out of that discussion, including how to work with the SDGs, how to really, crank up the on-ground delivery to make it meaningful. And then at the end of that session, we had, I think, let's say 2/3 who were optimistic about our abilities to solve the wastewater problem in textiles. The third session was then really kind of big picture. So we talked about global business models, we talked about governments, we talked about all of the kind of the financial flows that are going to be required to solve this problem. And we had some really interesting perspectives from, now I'm trying to remember every reason that's I was on the sofa, actually. It was a bit of a strange one for me. But I think out of that discussion came some really good insights about the future of where the sector will go. And at the end of the session, everybody put their hand up to say they thought that we were going to succeed in solving the problem. So it was a very good progression throughout the day.
So we hosted a session. It was called Clean and Circular, the Future of Made in China Fashion. And China has been this textile powerhouse for this last couple of decades. It gave rise to fast fashion. And as a consequence of that and other industrial manufacturing going on there's been rampant pollution. China is taking a lot of action, serious regulations to clean up. Textiles has been a big target in this, and so the industry has undergone a lot of transformation. Some of the more polluting factories have had to shut down because they're not compliant. Investment, capex requirements have increased, and some don't have the financial capability to make these investments, so they've also shut down. And what we wanted to do yesterday was to showcase the great work that China is doing and the organizations that are driving this change within the Chinese textile industry, because it's easy to not realize what China's doing, especially when you're over here in Europe. And some of the brands, they do have their headquarters in Europe and the US, so they're further removed. And so we launched our new report, the Insights from China's Textile Manufacturers, which we were very happy. Then we heard from the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, which is China's lead pollution watchdog. We then had a representative from CNTAC, which is the China National Textile Apparel Council. And we also heard from the Alliance for Water Stewardship and how they're driving change with cotton and also the textile industry. And we were then joined by Executive Director of ZDHC, Frank Michel. So it was such a great mix of everything that China's doing, everything that it's doing with the textile industry and the leading organizations. And actually ZDHC and CNTAC last year announced a strategic partnership. And you can see they see such a big future for this new style of fashion in China. So we were very happy to host that session.
Yeah, so I was in the same session with Laila, and basically she has summarized most of the points we discussed. And I think it's really interesting because at the end of the session, almost all the participants agree that it's really important to collaborate with each other, and a lot of more have to be done on this regard. And also, most of the participants are quite optimistic of the direction we're heading to in order to achieve the SDGs. So yeah, it's very positive, even though there's a lot of challenges ahead, but we are quite confident about that.
Collaboration is one of the themes that's been going throughout these sofas that I've been hosting here at the World Water Week. Another one that I've heard a lot about is changing of mindsets and behavioral change. How does that fit in the textile industry compared to many of these technical solutions and policy interventions that you're talking about here? How much of this is actually people just changing the way they look at pollution in the textile sector? I can put that out to all of you.
It's pretty tricky working with people who are dyed-in-the-wool agriculturalists and just used to one particular style, or people who are running a washing, dyeing, finishing organization. That's what they've done. So trying to get them to see that other people are making more money or doing less damage, or that there are possibilities for having more water in the community and having a healthier life, those are things that happen as a result of collaboration between different forces. It is not easy to get people to change their minds when they are looking at profitable businesses that are actually year on year delivering. So it's hard to tell people that they are in a water scarce area. You've got drawdown of 2 meters a year on the groundwater, and it can't last forever. And trying to get people to tackle this is not easy. So it has to be the radio, the chat, the newspaper, the discussion, the TV. It has to be all these things happening. It's not the data itself. That will not convince people. Emotion, heart, passion, and justification of change. Yeah?
I completely agree, yeah. I mean, I think one of the other big challenges we face with this sector in particular is the short-termism of thinking. Because, even if you can present a site or even a good grower with a business case to say, if you do this thing, you will save money or you will save time and effort. Actually, in a way, it doesn't matter, because the payoff might be a 2-year window. When they're thinking about the next 3-6 months, they're thinking about the next order run, they're thinking about when they're going to market next. So that is a real challenge, and I don't think any of us have quite cracked it yet, but I do think, there's a whole systemic question that needs to be asked about the cycles and how we get slightly more long-term in our thinking, all of us together, and to really work around that challenge as well, because at the moment I think we're kind of banging our heads against the door saying, but it makes sense, why aren't you doing it? We've got to really be sympathetic to those social factors. I think the other thing actually is, we're talking about collaboration being key, but getting a government to work with the private sector is quite odd for them. That's not necessarily something that's natural. Or getting an NGO like WWF to work with a corporate partner. There's an adjustment actually that needs to happen on both sides in order for any partnership like that to work. And I think, we've all made a lot of progress against that. I think we've all evolved. But there's still a lot of work to be done to be able to broker all of those different interests, all of those different ways of thinking and styles and measuring things and actually bringing them into some kind of alignment. So, I think it's almost all about social stuff, really.
I'm going to go a little further than where Lila went as well. And just you need behavioral change across the whole value chain of textiles, from the field to then the manufacturing to then the shops, the brands, and even the consumers, and then what consumers do with the products when they're done. And actually you also need, not quite sure if it's stepping back or in at a different place, but you need investors to also change their behavioral mindset. Because they drive a lot, the brands need to deliver on shareholders and so on, and so it propagates this kind of short-termism. And what we were really happy to find from our survey is that behavioral change is happening in China, at least in the factories. 98% were taking action to go green, which is clean and compliant. And 72% saw business benefit in transitioning to a circular model. So this change is starting to happen, but it's getting the right actors in the industry and stakeholders to come together and capitalize on this opportunity, this convergence. That's what we think.
Yeah, I totally agree, because all the players along the supply chain, they have the role to play, and also they can influence in order to improve the supply chain management. So what I see in the Chinese companies that when talk about making improvement, sometimes that for the small medium-sized factories, they quickly will think about a high investment in making the change. But this is not true, because a lot of small projects which require limited resources investment, and there's a lot of business case has been proven and has been demonstrated, and so for us it's very important to create a platform to show them this kind of business case, but at the same time to create a platform where all the factories can jointly learn from each other, and they can share the challenges and can discuss the solutions together. So I think that would be really important for them to have the mutual learning, and also to share the learnings and experience. That would be a good way to change their mindset, I think.
Reducing water pollution in the textile sector obviously is a work in progress. It sounds like much advances are being made, but how will you, I can ask individually, or all of you, what would a sustainable future look like in this sector? What needs to be done? If you just talk big picture very briefly, what would that look like when we're there? And will we know it when we see it?
I don't think really people know what it's going to be like in the future. That is the truth. We don't know if we're going to be into libraries of clothes. We don't know if we're going to keep the same sort of models. What we do know is that people have to see that we have to recycle, that you have to be careful, that you need to make materials that you wear that can be repaired, that are used, and that we are not making the situation worse for our descendants, that we are cleaning things up, that we're making an impact on the water, on the soil, and making a better life for people, both in producing crops and in being able to consume them. That's our driver.
So it is a mindset thing then, what you're describing there.
Yeah, it's mindset.
I mean, I think the other dimension is, in a way, there is a hard limit, because we're talking a lot now about planetary boundaries, and there are limits to the resources that we're actually able to access. So in the future, that is a non-negotiable for this sector. So whether there's more creative solutions around business models or whether it's optimizing the existing business model, I think, working within country boundaries is going to have to be the norm. And I think the challenge there is to also reconcile that with the development needs of a lot of the countries who are producing now. Because if you look at countries like some of the African countries who are now picking up textile production, or Bangladesh, where almost all the economy is connected in some way to textiles, they have their own development agenda and their own development rights in a way. So we need to balance the need for this much more sustainable way of working with the need to not forget about their interests and their development path. And I don't know exactly what that'll look like, but I think it'll be very interesting to find out. And we'll all have to contribute to get there. But I think it's very inspiring.
I think we're starting to see a little bit what the future of sustainable fashion could look like. We're seeing polyester digesting microbes being designed. I have a friend who makes fabrics from algae, and water eutrophication is a big issue. In China, 80% of the lakes are plagued by eutrophication. So we're now also going to help solve one problem to give a whole new material for another industry. And whilst we're seeing some innovations in what could be part of this new industry, I think we're also seeing that there is a need for a new business model, a change. And the buzzwords, circular economy, circularity, and it really has to be that, to what both of you have touched on. There are hard limits, and recycling must become the norm. So it's a new way of looking, and we're all here to focus on water. It's a new way of looking how to use water, and how water can drive the economy and waternomics and things like that. So it's a very fundamental business change that's needed.
If I see the textile sector 10 years back in China and now, I see a lot of changes in terms of legal framework conditions, and as well as the behavior change, the mindset of the players, the factories in the sector. So I do see that this is moving a positive direction. And I also see that in the main producing countries like Cambodia, India, Bangladesh, and China, they are starting the industry associations on the national level. They are also starting collaboration. So I hope that they can also learn the lessons from China and not going to repeat again in these countries.
Yeah, very good point.
Very interesting. Thank you all very much for joining us here on the Siwi Sofa. Obviously, a lot of good work being done and a lot of hope for the future in the water sector or the textile industry and water pollution. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to the Siwi Sofa. Stay tuned for more episodes throughout the World Water Week.